Today we're looking at Iron Viking / Sandworm team's Awfulshred. This is a worm and a wiper designed to destroy Linux machines in the Ukrainian network. Now a quick note to make about the cyber war between Ukraine and Russia. As Russia invades Ukraine, Western intelligence indicates that potential cyber attacks could spread elsewhere and spill over into other networks. While there has been little evidence of the spillover, analysts still believe that this intense cyber war could cause this to happen. Before the invasion on February 24th, there was a lot of cyber tension, and even attacks that happened between Russia and Ukraine. For example, we can see that Whispergate happened, a destructive malware that was found circulating in Ukraine. After Whispergate, there was a spurge of distributed denial of service attacks, briefly knocking Ukrainian banks and government websites offline. And days before the invasion, more data wiping malware was found. A Slovakian cybersecurity firm, ESET, said it found new wipers which were engineered months prior. This indicates that Russians knew that the tension was rising and were preparing for it. In the early hours of February 24th, as Russian troops marched into Ukrainian territories, hackers crippled tens of thousands of satellite internet modems in Ukraine and across Europe. Was designed in order to limit the access of internet that the Ukrainians had, and the modems provided internet to thousands of Ukrainians, and it still remains as one of the biggest publicly known cyber attacks to have taken place in this conflict. Industroyer 2 was found on the network alongside Awfulshred. Industroyer 2 is a new variant of Industroyer malware, which was found back in 2016 by Iron Viking in order to cut power in Ukraine. However, this time around, Industroyer 2 was not able to be successful as it was missing a few components that the hackers did not account for. So in addition to Industroyer 2 and Awfulshred, they also deployed ORCSHRED and SOLOSHRED. In our chain, we kind of cover ORCSHRED as well, as ORCSHRED is the worm and Awfulshred is the wiper. SOLOSHRED is also a wiper, however it is designed to be deployed against Solaris-based machines, and here at Prelude we decided to stick to the Linux-based wiper. So now let's discuss the different aspects of the worm and the wiper. The first component launched by the attacker was a worm, having its file named sc.sh. Obviously we won't be doing that as we will be running it in TTPs. This bash script started by adding a scheduled task to launch the wiper component at 5:58 p.m. assuming the system in the local time zone. Unless it was launched with the owner argument, this is likely a way to avoid the initial system to use that launched the worm to be wiped. The script then iterates over the network, trying to find any machine with SSH open on port 22, 2468, 2468.7, and 522. Then it tries to SSH using a list of credentials. We will not be using credentials at Prelude as we decided to go with a private key attack, trying to find private keys on the local machine and using them to SSH into other machines on the network. Once it finds that reachable SSH server, it'll log in and rerun the script that it just ran on the initial machine, this time without the owner flag, so it can install the wiper. Speaking of, the wiper was a shell script named wobf.sh, which I'd like to think stands for wiper obfuscated.sh, because it was a lightly obfuscated shell script. The requirements that it needed to run was that it needed to run as the root user. It also needed bash version 3.0 or above. It needed kernel 2.6.27 or above, and it needed the tools either DD or shred, uname, and sed. If all those requirements passed, then it'll disable any web server available on the machine and SSH to make it more difficult for incident responders to recover the machine. Next, it removes the /boot/home and the /var log directories to speed up the process of deletion. Then it ensures that it's wiping all drives by checking if other drives exist on the machine and clearing those as well. To demo, I guess I'll talk about a few prerequisites that you'll need. The first being a root NUMA instance running on a Linux machine. In this case, I have an elevated NUMA instance running on Ubuntu, but you can do it on any Linux machine. Next, you'll need to generate some SSH keys as a root user on that NUMA instance, and make sure that public key is in the authorized_keys file of a different Linux machine on the same network. This is so that it can SSH in and spread the worm. I did that on 2 machines down, so from this machine to the next machine, and then from that machine to the one after that. And I made sure to put those authorized keys files in the root directory, in the .sh root directory, so that it can SSH as root. Other than that, we are ready to look at this chain. So I'll go ahead and pull it up. You'll see a bunch of TTPs, but I promise it's not that complicated. First being a check if the machine has already been infected. If it has been infected, then it won't run. If it has not been infected, then it will run and go through the chain. The next is a stage wiper TTP. This one can be disabled and re-enabled based on your liking. It is defanged. It is the original payload and defanged, so we won't be running the main function, which does everything. It is commented out, but if you want to run it, you can uncomment it, or you can just disable it if you don't want to run it. It doesn't affect the execution of the rest of the chain. It just stages the actual wiper, so that when you do schedule it in the next TTP at 5:58 p.m., which is what Sandworm / Iron Viking did, it will get executed, or I guess it won't if it doesn't exist. Next, it'll enumerate some SSH keys so they can spread the worm. Next, it'll figure out whether you're using IPA, ipconfig, or ifconfig, so that it can figure out the network, so it can scan for available machines in the next TTP. Next, it'll generate a random name for that agent, so that we can queue up an API request later on. Next, last but not least, it'll spread the worm using the private keys found on the machine. So it'll start SSHing in and installing NUMA instance on wherever it can. And finally, it'll queue the chain on the infected machines that it finds. So we'll go ahead and deploy the chain, and see what's going on. So you can see that it's checking if the machine's infected. It went through, it staged the wiper, it scheduled the wiper execution, it found some SSH keys, it found what tool it needs to use, it scanned the network, it generated the random name for the agent, and now it is spreading the worm using those private keys. It found quite a bit of private keys. I did add extra in there. Maybe I went a little overboard, but it's to show that it can really find the original one and actually succeed. So we'll go ahead and give that a second and see what's going on. Okay, finally, as you can see, I was able to figure out which private key to use, and that's the one that greened out right over here, and then all the other ones were red, and then it queued the chain on the infected machine. So if you click on that, you'll see that it's already running, and it's at the point where it's spreading the worm on the chain. We could wait for the next one, but I think I'm gonna end it here. If you guys have any questions, you can leave them in the comments, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye.